Crabb Sales here. If you love this podcast and you'd like to support us, check out details at our website, chat10looks3.com. Click on podcast, then support the pod. There are free options and also paid subscriptions starting at $2 a month. Thank you.
Hi, this podcast is recorded on Gadigal land. Lee and I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place and also the custodians of the place where you're listening, wherever you are.
Annabelle Crabb, I have been dying to see you to talk about a book that I just finished that I love so much that I just know that you are going to love as well.
God, all right, that's a strong open.
Okay, it's called I Want Everything.
Okay,
and
I'm still with you.
It's a first book by, the author's name is Dominic Amarina. It's so good. It's Australian author, set in Melbourne. The premise is a guy lives with his girlfriend. They're both kind of struggling writers. He's kind of doesn't really have any ideas. The woman's a bit more successful than him.
He sounds exhausting.
He's between ideas. He's swimming some laps at the local pool, and he sees this old woman, who's over on the other side of the pool, and he feels like he recognises her, and he goes away and he's racking his brains, and then it sort of dawns on him who it is, and it's a woman called Brenda Shales, who was an Australian author in the 1970s. She had 2 books that became absolute classics, and then she kind of disappeared from public view and became a recluse, and no one's ever known what happened to her, but these 2 books are absolutely iconic. And so he decides, wow, if I could get Brenda Shales to talk to me and tell me the secret of what happened and how she wrote these 2 Australian literary classics, then that could be my book.
Oh, it's like, I don't have a story idea, so I'll take your story.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Amazing.
then these layers of, I don't want to give anything away, but he then has to persuade Brenda Shales. He has to have a meeting with her and persuade her to talk to him. He has to find a way to meet her, and then he has to find a way to get her to talk. And it unfolds from there. Does
he just go up to her in his dick stickers at the pool?
He does not.
Oh.
But I don't want to say too much more because it's kind of how he meets her is a very central plot point.
Oh.
It's really, I could hardly put it down. I knocked it over in about 3 days.
Oh, okay.
It's quite tense. It's a book where you know that something is going to unravel, and the question is, how is this going to unravel?
Okay.
And that keeps propelling you forward. The Brenda Shales character, I would be surprised if a little bit of her vibe is not drawn from Helen Garner. There's something a bit Garnery about her as a character. Not completely, obviously, because obviously Helen Garner never disappeared from view, but there's just something a bit like that. And it's almost this... It's almost got a feeling of like a bit through the looking glass, because you're reading a book about a writer writing about a writer. Like, it's got this kind of complex layer, and it's an interesting on the level about the ethics of who owns a story and
Right.
so forth, and also what you'll do to get a story. It's really well done, and it's got
How interesting. And
beautifully written.
Is the wife just sort of
Ruth, her name
churning out airport novels all this time, or is she involved?
You remember last time in the last episode I mentioned I'd heard the term daughter boarding?
Oh, yeah.
She's just written an essay about her mother that's gone absolutely viral. It's huge. And so she's also grappling a little bit with the consequences of, writing a story about a real life kind of person. And she's had all this success. And so, anyway, look, it's got some beautiful turns of phrase. It's a great piece of writing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I Want Everything. And why it's called I Want Everything is because he when he goes to see Brenda Shales, he's like, I want everything. I want you to tell me all of it.
So there is this weird thing that happens between writers, and it leads to real life significant dramas, is when I don't write novels, but I know that people who do and who are feeling a bit stuck get sort of idea envy, and so they hear of somebody who's got a great idea and they get a bit like,
Right.
And then there are circumstances, I think, where a writer is like, well, that's a great story idea and you don't deserve it. Do you remember, like, a couple of years ago I read this novel called The Plot? I can't remember what the name of the author was, but it was about this kid going to a literary workshop or writing class, and he said, I've got the greatest idea the greatest plot ever.
Yeah.
And then basically it gets
that,
nicked by the lecturer. Anyway.
Yeah.
You know, but this idea of a story.
Oh, I read that. I definitely read that. Yeah.
But a story being a commodity and a tension between writers where one of them is like, I could do a better job of that story than you could. Or in this case, it sounds like the older lady's story is just sitting there not being used by her.
Yeah.
Like, let me use it because I need a story. Yeah.
And also a bit of he goes to a dinner with some friends who are all kind of writers, but in this couple, one of them has like a kind of job because the chief protagonist and his partner Ruth don't have jobs, and they kind of get grants, and he does some stuff where he goes and has medical testing to get some money and stuff. So they kind of cobble it together, you know, living off sort of nothing.
Yeah.
And then they go and see these other friends who are writers, but their writing is on the side because they have actual jobs to have a bit more security.
Right.
And he and his girlfriend kind of look down at them a bit because they're like, well, they're not really living the writer, you know, kind of lifestyle, blah, 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 blah. But then the others, obviously, I think, are kind of like, well, you know, that's how we do it, you know, because we need to have some security and so forth. So there's a bit of that kind of, and as you say, the judgment and the competitiveness, because everyone's scrambling to get published, to make a living. They're hoping that they're going to write something that's a big hit. And so it's that sense of, oh, okay, so you've just got lucky because you're at the pool and you stumbled across Brenda Shales. Are you really the best person to write Brenda Shales' story? Is Brenda Shales going to get, is it going to be a shared byline? Like this kind of, you know, vibe.
Wow.
It's great. It's really, really terrific.
There is something uniquely frustrating about reading a book that's a great story, but the writer hasn't capitalised on it enough, and you feel like, now that's a busted flush. Like nobody can write that story. Or when you read a biography and you think, oh my God, you've somehow managed to make a really interesting person totally flat. Yeah.
I would totally love to at some point be in a writer's room. I think that would be so fun.
Like for a
TV show, or a screenplay or something. That would be so fun.
You've never said a less surprising thing to me. Like that is just so up your alley. But can you imagine how annoying you'd be? Like you'd be like,
I was talking.
You would not be cool.
I was talking to a mate yesterday who does that kind of thing, and he also was saying he thought that I would love it. But I said, what happens? And he's like, often there's just a lot of talk about people's real lives and real life experiences that then can kind of wend their way into things. And he was talking about, he'd listened to a pod where they were talking about the writer's room for Succession. And
oh, God.
And he said that somebody was talking about having to get the ferry to work and something or other, and then it actually got used in a scene where Greg has to get the ferry to work. So, yeah.
Why hasn't there been a proper behind-the-scenes doco about a writer's room? I would watch the absolute shit out of that. Like,
same.
You know how Succession, obviously they've got the podcast. I mean, surely some enterprising documentarist.
Speaking of Succession, I went the other night to see Harriet Walter is out here, Dame Harriet Walter for the Sydney Writers Festival, who played Logan Roy's wife, the ex-wife, the British wife.
Yeah.
One of my favourite characters on Succession. Yeah. She is absolutely brilliant. Anyway, she's written this book about Shakespeare's women, and she read some bits from it. Oh man, she can really write. And it was incredible. Early on in the discussion, the moderator asked her, somehow the 7 Stages of Man came up, and the moderator said, any chance you know it off by heart, do you want to recite it? And so she got about halfway through and then couldn't remember. But my God, it was incredible when she started. It wasn't like her demeanour changed or anything. She still sounded extremely conversational when she started reciting, but the whole energy in the room changed. It was like, I guess, the power of both the words and the language, the content and her delivery. It was gobsmacking. It was so impressive.
It's like that time that we, one of our greatest indulgences ever, or at least mine, we got Pamela Rae to come and just give us a hot steaming plate. Hot steaming plate of A Room of One's Own, which is just, you know, just Rae doing Virginia Woolf, just completely
absolutely incredible,
just,
alters the whole room. Anyway, I've been, other than that, which is just, that book's just come out, I actually went back and reread possibly my favourite book of all time. which is
not a Dickens book.
no, The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields, who's a Canadian writer.
Okay, I've heard of that book, but I had no idea it was your favourite book of all time.
Yeah, it won the Pulitzer, I think. Oh man, it is. I absolutely love it. It's a book about a woman from her birth on the floor of a very modest house in regional Manitoba in Canada to her, and it just goes right through to her death. And she doesn't have a very remarkable life. It's remarkable in... What's remarkable is the reminder that everyone's life's remarkable in its own way.
Right. Is it a bit Monroe-y?
It is, yeah. Carol Shields, Alice Munro, Margaret Atwood, it's in that kind of family of literature. It is an absolutely beautiful book and incredibly moving, and you just kind of get swept along into this woman's story. It's really hard to explain because nothing very much happens, and yet it's extremely rich. She ends up in a Florida retirement village, and yeah, it's because it's one life condensed over time. The final chapter is extremely moving, and it's lists of stuff like all of her, after she's dead, the addresses that she had, all the things she never did, or not all, but things that she never did, and what was left in her room that they cleaned up at their retirement village. And yeah, it's a really superb bit of work.
It's kind of the quiet mirror image of what we were talking about earlier about, this sort of anxious jostling over stories and, this plot's amazing and it's kind of like an existing story is like an off-the-hook suit, right, that you can then fill out as best you can. But when you commit as a writer to a story in which not much happens, it's liberating, and it's also, I think, massively challenging. Like, it sorts the wheat from the chaff
for absolutely.
Writers, because to sustain emotion and a kind of investment and dragging a reader in to a plot where the big thing isn't what happens, it's what happens inside that character's.
It's really hard, and it's, as you know, I often refer to those stories and films as like small stories, and I really love them. I saw a film actually the other day that fits this category that somebody had been asking me to watch for ages. It's called Perfect Days. It's set in Tokyo. It's about a man who cleans Tokyo public toilets.
Oh, okay.
Wim Wenders is the director. It is a film in which there's this man, incredibly handsome Japanese man, so elegant, who he cleans public toilets. And when I was in Tokyo last year, I went to visit, my friend that I was with wanted to go and see these public toilets that were in the film. So I'd already seen the toilets that are getting cleaned. Tokyo has some extraordinary public toilets.
Yeah. Top class toilets.
Anyway, he takes a great deal of pride in cleaning the toilets, to the degree that he has a little mirror that he puts under the rim to check is the underneath of the rim meticulous, like absolutely takes huge pride. And then he has a very set routine every day. He cleans the toilets. He has his lunch on this bench in this same park. He has he wakes up in the morning, he spritzes these little plants, he gets a coffee out of the coffee machine. The same routine every single day, very simple routine. And he has very little interaction with anybody. Even he's got a young guy who comes and goes, who cleans toilets with him, and he barely talks to him. But he always reads a book in bed at night, and he really loves music, and he has music on in the van as he's going. Very little happens in the film beyond that. There's tiny moments of interaction with people. His niece comes to visit at one point. He has this exchange with his sister. He goes once a week to this izakaya and has dinner. And yet somehow it just packs a massive emotional punch, and you just find yourself...
there's not a lot of dialogue.
That actor probably has fewer than 6 lines in the entire film. And yet he won a heap of awards for it. He conveys so much. It's absolutely incredible. So it's one of those films where the scene where his sister comes to pick up the niece, I won't say too much because I don't want to give it away, but like I just started crying immediately, and I was like, how did they do that? How have they... I've just been watching this dude clean toilets and do this, and not much has happened at all, and yet suddenly, like, clearly somehow they have created this sense of emotion, investment, whatever, and it's hit me. And then the final scene as well, he's in the car and he's listening to some music and they just stay on an extreme close-up of his face and he does all this stuff with his face. It's a really, really beautiful film. I suspect it's a film that some people will go, that's one of my all-time favourite films, and some people will go, I didn't get that film at all.
Huh. It's a pretty bold move, isn't it? I mean, on the part of a writer, or and even bolder for a filmmaker, to just strip back and vacate, like to take things away from a piece of cinema, to the point where there's so little by way of story that as a viewer, I mean, I guess this is the technique. As a viewer, you rush in to fill the gap with your own reflections.
Yeah.
So, and it's such a weird craft to be able to find the right images and very gently tap the emotional pressure points that cause you as a viewer. I guess it gives you the space to insert your own reflections, which will always be about your own life.
100%. Right? And that is exactly what this film does, where you can interpret, you know, pretty much, because it leaves a lot of space. Like, so say with when the sister comes, like in my own mind, I have this whole backstory as
where you have a sister.
no, about those characters where because there's a great deal of space and often the lines that are said are ambiguous. So she says to the brother, it's clear they haven't seen each other for a long time. And she says to the brother, you know, dad's in the nursing home or whatever, and you know, you should come and see him. He won't act like he used to. That's all she says. And so you're left to kind of think, I was then thinking, okay, maybe he's gay and the father was not accepting of that. And then I thought maybe he's failed at something and brought shame on the family, which is why he's living alone and working as a toilet cleaner. I noticed all the time that whenever he goes to the izakaya, he always just had water, and that was known that he was only going to have water. They just always just give him a water. So is he an alcoholic? Like, you know, there's lots of space there for you to put your own interpretation. Now, I thought it was a film that was a meditation on finding contentment in simplicity, and that the pace of the film was meant to give you a feeling as the viewer of the pleasure of just slowing down and watching something slow. And it also made me really want to do some cleaning. It made the cleaning.
Was there product placement for like spray and wipe or something? You say that he sprayed under the rims. Is there a device for that?
The cleaning was like really satisfying watching him. He was an excellent cleaner. In fact, he's kind of my dream man. He was a great toilet cleaner. He didn't have much to say. He liked reading a book and going to bed early, and he was really handsome.
So this is an erotic thriller for you, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'll learn a little bit more about you every time we have one of these chats, please, Sales.
It reminded me a little bit of, but a bit less plot than. Do you remember the film I really love called Past Lives? About yeah, it's a little bit in that.
I remember you like that film.
Yeah, it's a bit in that. Did you end up seeing that?
No, I'm not seeing it as an act of aggression towards you.
You're going to come to the podcast in about 3 years, and you're going to go.
And I'll be like, let me tell you about this
Past
amazing.
Lives.
I know, it'll happen.
It was really fantastic.
Also, it just struck me that it's such a radical thing to do, given shortened attention spans and the fact that you just sort of, if you choose to, you can spend your whole day just being pummeled with images that give you instant satisfaction and pops of dopamine or whatever. Dopamine? How is it pronounced? We can't agree. Dopamine. I'm sorry. That stupidity is very close to the surface still.
We're never not going to call that thing dopamine now.
Just for any newcomers, we did have about
when
15
you're
minutes about
dopamine. When you're feeling quite low and there's nowhere to go.
Dopamine. I feel like I'm just a gigolo now. Look, it's so hard being an autodidatte, isn't it? Anyway, what was it saying? Can't remember. Oh yeah, just it's actually an act of almost kind of revolutionary rebellion to make a film, spend money
Super
on
small.
making a film that's so stripped back. And
So it's so far from,
vendors.
like, say, a film like Mission Impossible. It's not even recognisable almost as the same art form.
Right, exactly, because it isn't.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were talking about rereading your favourite book of all time that I just found out about, probably something you only tell your best friend, I guess.
Do you know what? I actually recommended it to her when I reread it, and then she informed me last weekend that she's finding it pretty boring. So she is sliding down those rankings.
There's hope. Where there's life, there's hope. And I was thinking today on my way in here, this is going to be boring because I haven't been consuming anything except electoral history
and tea
for 3 months, and tea, like so much tea. But then I thought, actually, my youngest child and her parents have slid into, of which I am one, obviously. We've been watching Community on.
Oh, I love Community.
So, and I feel like I've never talked about it on the pod before, just because we're always sort of watching it. But like, I do find, and I mean, in our house that we moved into a couple of years ago, we've got a television that's sort of in the that's sort of near the kitchen. So I've never been a television on in the background sort of person. But while we're cooking dinner, we watch Community, and God, that's a great show.
Oh, it's awesome. It's so fun.
And it's one of those ones you can jump into. There's 6 seasons of it. It is unbelievably well observed and so fun, and yet with these pockets of profundity. And I was thinking, so Dan Harmon, the showrunner who created Community, it's set in this, I think, Colorado town, and the cast are all students at a community college. And it's just bristling with famous people.
Yep.
There's lots of cameos. But the core cast is Joel McHale plays this guy called Jeff Winger, who's a failed lawyer. He's kind of like been disgraced, and he's come to retrain, and he's kind of, he's a very, very egotistical, kind of like big swinging dick kind of guy. The series starts where he meets this hot girl called Britta, played by Gillian Jacobs, and he sets up a study group because he wants to get it on with the hot girl in his Spanish class.
Yeah.
And he ends up with this whole group who become the core kind of group, and it's Chevy Chase, Alison Brie, Donald Glover, who, oh my gosh,
amazing cast,
incredible. But for me, Danny Pudi, who plays
he's great.
Abed, is just the glue of the whole series. But I was thinking about what the formula is for one of these shows that's set in an institution of some kind. And like, I guess way back in the day you had like your Beverly Hills 90210s, that are set in an educational institution of some kind. You can see why it's a good device, because everybody's come from different places. They've got their own dramas. They're making friends. They're breaking up this, romance. The interesting thing about Community is there really isn't romance between the core characters.
No.
But each of them has a kind of unattractive side of their character, but it's always in conflict with this sort of need to be friends and have this group dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's just overlaid with this intense absurdity and these gimmicks that roll from episode to episode. Like there's one episode where they are all in claymation.
Right.
And you just think, okay, you're just off your chops now, people. But it's so funny, and as I said, every now and again, just this deep vertical of an emotional truth bomb or a weakness that is observed by the group in one of them, and for a minute they exchange brutality for just deep care. I
absolutely adored that show, and I was watching it at around the same time as another show that I love that I feel like has a similar vibe called Silicon Valley. Did you ever watch that?
No, I haven't watched it,
Right.
but
it's great.
I feel like that would be a similar one. And I feel like there's a lot of series out there that I could really enjoy that I haven't really quite got into.
Silicon Valley has got one of, in my view, the funniest scenes I've ever seen in a comedy. And it's kind of, it's similar feel that, as you say, they're like set in a particular circumstance. In this case,
and they've all come from somewhere else, right?
Yeah. In this case, it's a software startup, and then everyone's got their distinct personality and their particular brand of humour and whatnot. And it's actually completely terrific. Yeah, Community reminds me of kind of Community is one of those things that I'll have a bit of a nostalgia watch of because I just know, as you say, it's going to be reliably entertaining. Speaking of nostalgia, I watched the other day, it's on Paramount Plus. There's a series called Behind the Music, and it's got all the, 80s
You'd have
types.
Your sweaty mitts all over that, no doubt.
So I watched somebody who I've always absolutely loved, Huey Lewis, the episode about Huey Lewis. Oh, God, he's a great guy.
Okay, that's the first time I've thought about Huey Lewis in probably 30 years.
Hey, look, all those 80s songs.
Hip to be Square? Was he Hip to be Square?
Yeah, Hip to be Square. I Want a New Drug.
Do you remember when Malcolm Turnbull was on a FM radio interview and he was asked to name his favourite song, and he nominated a song by the Dynamic Hypnotics?
Really? Wow.
That's so funny.
The
They're in
Power
the
of
same
Love
spot
was
as
in
Huey
Back to the
Lewis
Future.
for me.
I love Michael J. Fox, as you know, and I associate Huey Lewis with Michael J. Fox because of Back to the Future, because they used. Anyway, if you go on Spotify and you do, the Huey Lewis best of, it's just banger after banger. Anyway, he's got a terrific voice, and it's all about how he grew up and what's happened with his career. But the thing that it was,
what has happened to his career?
Well, he still very, very sadly, he's almost fully deaf.
No.
So they kind of talk about how he still kind of tries to make music, but he's hitting the point where he can only really respond to vibration, and so he's having a really, really hard time. But they do this lovely thing, which they did in the Beckham doco too, which is they play him things from his life and film clips and stuff, and he talks a bit to them. And it's just, I love watching people's face when they go back and look at big moments in their career, and he just seems like a really lovely chap who's kind of making the best of a pretty crap situation. So yeah, unfortunately that's what's happened to Huey, but it is a lovely program that I highly recommend.
You're just going to be dipping in and out of that program forever, right?
Totally. I've got a million. There's one about the Bangles. It's all just 80s. It's just made for people. It's like a bot just made a thing for me, and it's all those music, music kind of ones, or the making of big films like Die Hard or whatever.
Right. So I'm working out what your ideal day now is. It's you watch that whilst that handsome man from Perfect Day cleans your dunny. And then everybody's done and dusted in bed with a book by 9 p.m.
Exactly, that's right. Absolutely perfect dream day. All right, well, on that note,
I think we're done.
I think we are.
All right.
See you soon.
See ya.